Making recipes dedicated to my ex-boyfriends part 4, Eric number 2. Now, I met Eric number 2 at a Christmas disco party where he was the only one dressed to theme, and I wish I could say I remember that night, but the truth is, not much of it. I do remember having no place at that party and seeing a member of the cast of Hamilton in the corner, so I joked, oh, there's a Patriot in the corner, and people thought it was a football player, and that's when I realized when I'm drunk, my jokes don't land. So naturally, I found solace in the one person dressed in a full 1970s disco outfit and shockingly white jeans, but then the real problem happened when I realized he was way too smart for me, so I had to start shoving Christmas cookies in my mouth to try to sober up. Key point, it doesn't work. But apparently what does work is instead of giving Eric number 2 my phone number, I gave him my Instagram handle because apparently I've been thirsty for followers from the start. But he managed to slide into those DMs, and I know this story isn't a funny one, but that's because 4 weeks later we said I love you, 6 weeks later we got a dog, and 4 years later we're doing okay. And I know it's an ex-boyfriend series, but I had to save the best for last. If you're on food TikTok, you know about the Sandwich Boys, and I'm not going to call anybody out specifically because I'm in love with one of them, but you know the ones making those huge sandwiches with like all the sauce and I just want to be a sandwich boy.
To be fair, that did hurt my mouth.
But I, Mother Snacks, is gonna go where no sandwich boy has gone before, which is to the plant-based side, because although they are posting sandwich thirst traps, those thirst traps tend to be very meaty, for lack of a better word. So we're going all in, all plants, with a red cabbage, apple, mango, carrot, scallion, lime juice, slaw thing, and then our sauce, which is roasted red peppers, onion, habanero, apple cider vinegar, honey. It's addicting. And then these are also addicting, and they are also plants. It's Alpha Foods chicken, which are so crispy, and I feel like to reach my true sandwich boy aesthetic, I need to have some sort of protein on there. This is me trying to imitate their plating. I did fine. This is not an ad. This is a cake. But the thing is, sometimes I don't mind an ad. But there's a huge difference between a good ad and a bad ad, and then another huge difference between people who aren't doing ads, but it feels like they're doing an ad. But I think the main thing that gets me about ads is like, I just want transparency, you know? So the reason I started on this tangent is because this was an ad on another platform. They're not paying for this platform, but I'm working with Blueberries, and they're actually doing something this month where if you tag them in any platform showing how you're using Blueberries, they're donating $1 to No Kid Hungry up to $50,000. And in my book, this is a good ad to do. 1 in 6 kids might face hunger this summer, and if I can do something small with my platform to help mitigate that, why not? And that's why this is here, even though... Welcome back to the series where I'm making recipes for people in my comments. I saw this one, I loved it, and I had to pull out all the stops. I know I make a lot of breads, but this might be my favorite bread. The subway's coming by, so you won't be able to hear me. Please make this bread. So this is called ripple bread, and what you need is just 1/2 cup of Greek yogurt or skyr, 1 cup of flour, 3/4 teaspoon baking powder, 1/4 cup of ice cold water, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. No yeast, no rest time. You just roll it out until it's like a really thin oval, and then layer it in a cast iron pan. And the toppings are really up to you. I know not everybody is a fan of anchovies, but I wanted to make this really special, so I made like a cilantro anchovy oil, and I also did walnut anchovies because I'm a monster, but I wanted this to be special, and if your palates are there, embrace it and do it, and then top it with Parmesan. And I hope you love this recipe as much as I do. Zested, but not forgotten. If you really think about it, this and putting peanut butter on toast, very similar, except this is way better. Good morning. The Forgotten series. I started a series called My Daughter's Kitchen because I wanted to make recipes that I could share with my daughter. It was a part of self-healing. It was a part of growth. But this Mother's Day, I actually reached out to my mother. And to spare you the details, it did not go as I hoped. For context, I was not the perfect teenager. I was actually sent to one of those wilderness therapy camps that you might have seen on your FYP where they put you in solitary and semi-torture you. Yep, that was me. And from then on, I took on the spirit of like accountability. Like I really just wanted to be good. But after years of apologizing, I know it's a two-way street, and sometimes I want an apology for being hurt myself. But you can't always get what you want. And I think the hardest thing to hear was that she said she had no negative impact on her life by me not being in it. And the reason I put this series on pause was because I thought I could fix my relationship with my mom. Like, I thought it could be a little success story. But it's really hard knowing that you have to build your own family. Because I was still holding out hope that I could have the one I was born with, that I could have my own. So I'm going to continue to build these recipes for my future daughter, and I'm going to continue to work on this myself. Because when we hung up the phone, I realized neither of us said I love you. And that's when I realized some things are conditional. And I might not know you, but I love you. So you might have noticed I have not used my food processor in a while, which for a lot of you is probably a sigh of relief. But I honestly didn't notice the food processor thing until I was getting out my tiny blender for this recipe. And I was like, man, I haven't used the food processor in a minute. But I think to understand the significance of said food processor, we need to understand the origin of the food processor. I mean, this sounds like a Marvel Cinematic Universe story, but whatever. The food processor originated because I was obsessed with being another creator. Like, bonus points if you can guess who it was, but I was hyperfixated on creating food the way they did. And through that hyperfixation, I was making food that was good, but it just it didn't feel like me. I was steamrolling myself, for lack of a better rolling pin metaphor. And some of you might remember that 2 months ago, I just said, screw it. I'm no longer faking it for social media. I'm going to cook what I want to cook. And that 2 months has been just mind-alteringly life-changing. But it's only been 2 months. And that got me thinking about how much we can change if we allow ourselves the time to change, even if it's not a significant amount of time. And got me thinking about a quote that I heard once about how we overestimate what we can do in a year, but we underestimate what we can do in 5 years, and how all of our little choices are what leads to the big changes in our life. So my little change of no longer faking it led to another little change of abandoning my food processor, which led to another little change of creating what I want to make. And that's how we got this recipe. And it feels good. I was talking to my friend about how I'm a food blogger, but I still consider myself a content creator in the intuitive eating and food positivity space. And she said, that's so funny, because you never talk about it anymore. And I responded, yes, but maybe that's the entire point, because this might just be me. But after a while, I got tired of the Instagram infographic that's just eat the damn cookie, or count orgasms, not calories. Because although those messages are things I needed to hear, sometimes to feel fixed, I have to not always be reminded that something was broken. I think I've gained quite literally 1 million followers since I last talked about my eating disorder. And I think I've gained quite literally 1.5 million followers since I was ever a quote-unquote health food account. Shout out to the avocado donuts. Let's pretend they never existed. But through all that, I still feel like a pretty healthy account. And I think the best way I do that is not shouting into the void that 2,000 calories a day is a myth from the 90s, but instead by just existing. But that could also just be me living in a bubble where I consumed so much of this information in 2016, so I feel societally we don't need it anymore. But that's a question I genuinely wonder all the time. If you like me went through some weird stuff with food, is this topic still helpful, or are we just at a point where we're existing? Is this heaven? Good morning. So I'm recipe testing for a dinner party that I'm throwing this weekend. I'm very excited, but I want the dishes to be cohesive but also different. So I made one sweet starter and one savory starter, and you can decide which one you like best. Now I wanted them to be cohesive, so we're starting with seasonal vegetables, and yes, rhubarb is a vegetable. I'm just quickly pickling it so it tastes less like a vegetable and more like a fruit. And the other way I'm making these cohesive is I'm using Fage Greek yogurt in both. So for the sweet, it's just honey, lemon zest, and their yogurt, and then I add the pickled rhubarb on top with some strawberries and some dukkha. It's really good. Oh, and don't forget honey and mint for some color, and that is dish number 1. Now dish number 2, we're also starting with faye, again keeping it cohesive, but for this I'm adding dill, a criminal amount of garlic, lemon juice, salt, and pepper. This is the best way to make a yogurt dip. I will die on this hill. And then keeping it seasonal, I'm just quickly frying up some zucchini chips. So I can't really call it a salad, but it is most definitely a dip. And both recipes are linked below as part of faye's Sweet and Savory Challenge, but I want to see yours. What would you do? Welcome back to 7 p.m., the series where I actually cook and just put it on the internet. And this is what I made for dinner on my birthday. You don't have to say happy birthday because this was a week ago, but you can say you're surprised that I'm an air sign. Now, these are scallopy scallops, which you might think are intimidating to cook, but I wanted to treat myself. And you can also totally do this with tofu. But this is very much just like a joyful experience if you want to like come home and just like take some time to actually cook. So this recipe is actually inspired by my good friend Karina Wolf of Kale Me Maybe. She made it like last year, and all I'm doing is adding this sun-dyed tomato relish, which if you have never done a cutting board maceration process, it is so fun. You kind of just put everything that seems delicious on your cutting board and mash it together. Incredibly soothing. And by that time, the sweet potatoes and the garlic should be done, so you just want to mash those two together. Also remarkably satisfying. And I know you guys had some questions about the always pan. I'm a fan. I know there's a lot of intricacies to it, so I can make a video on that if you want to see that. But for scallops, don't be intimidated. Just 2 minutes on each side so you don't overcook them. And again, you can also do the exact same thing with pressed tofu and then relish on top. And that was my birthday dinner.